The ridgeline is a wall of jagged rock, and below it, the dry riverbed has become a kill zone. 4 soldiers are pinned, the dirt geysering around them from heavy machine gun fire. High above, 2 jets are circling, but they're looking at empty sand 5 miles away because of a single transposed digit. If you were sitting in that cockpit, hearing the screams for help over the static, would you trust the official coordinates or your own gut? The sun dies over the Obsidian Corridors in shades of bruised purple and rusted iron. Out here, the wind doesn't just blow, it scours, carrying a fine, microscopic grit that finds its way into the seals of engines and the lungs of men. The flight line is a graveyard of cooling metal, the rhythmic clink, clink, clink of heat escaping titanium housing the only music in the dirt. A canvas command tent glows like a sickly paper lantern in the center of the dust. Inside, the air is thick, stale coffee, the ozone of overworked electronics, and the heavy, humid scent of men who have spent 14 hours in fire-retardant suits. Then, a voice cuts through the low hum. Sound off, call signs only. The responses are crisp. They are names that carry the weight of ego and history. Viper, Rhino, Havoc. They are barked with the confidence of men who believe the sky belongs to them by birthright. Then, a beat of silence. A quieter voice follows. A woman's voice. Spectre? For half a second, the tent is a vacuum. Then, the friction breaks. A short, sharp laugh from a pilot in the corner. A snort of derision from a maintainer leaning against a radio rack. Spectre? A voice mocks, stretching the syllables until they sound thin and ridiculous. What is that? A character from a video game? You lose your way to the arcade, Captain? Imagine the psychological weight of that moment. You have trained for years. You have bled in simulators and pushed your body to the edge of G-force-induced blackouts. You arrive at a forward operating base where the life expectancy is measured in sorties, and before you can even unstow your gear, you are reduced to a punchline. What do you do in that silence? Do you snap back? Do you demand respect for the bars on your shoulders? Captain Ilara Vance does none of that. She stands just outside the tent flap, her helmet tucked under an arm. Her flight suit is a map of her work, not her vanity. There are no custom-stitched nicknames on the chest, no vibrant morale patches depicting skulls or lightning bolts. The fabric is faded to a dull charcoal from 100 washes, the elbows and knees worn thin, polished by the actual friction of a cockpit, rather than the pride of a parade deck. She doesn't blink as the laughter rolls over her. She doesn't shift her weight. Her eyes remain fixed on a point somewhere beyond the canvas, looking through the noise. To the men in that tent, she is a normal transfer. On paper, her record is a desert. No bold citations, no highlighted aerial victories, no flowery commendations. She is smaller than the others, compact and efficient, a gear in a machine that they assume is brand new. In a world where size and volume are often mistaken for capability, Ilara Vance is a ghost they've already decided to ignore. But look closer. Watch her hands. While the other pilots trade barbs and recount their near misses with animated gestures, Vance's hands are settled. They aren't clenched. They aren't twitching with the restless adrenaline of the inexperienced. They are loose, balanced, and waiting. It is the posture of a predator that has already calculated the distance to its prey and decided the chase hasn't started yet. She is the first one on the flight line every morning, long before the sun manages to pierce the haze of the corridors. She doesn't wait for the crew chiefs to finish their walkarounds. She performs her own. You can hear the rhythmic tap-tap of her knuckles against the fuselage, checking for the slight change in resonance that signals a loose rivet or a hairline fracture in the composite. She runs her fingers along the intake edges, feeling for the microscopic nicks that a bird strike or high-altitude ice might leave behind. She doesn't joke with the maintainers. She doesn't complain about the heat. When they speak, she listens with a terrifying, singular focus. When she nods, it isn't out of politeness. It's a confirmation of data received. In the chow hall, she is a shadow at the end of the long plywood tables. She eats methodically, fuel for the machine, and she moves on. She doesn't need the noise of the burn barrel stories or the hollow camaraderie of the card games. She looks lost. A junior lieutenant whispers to his wingman as Vance walks past them toward the darkness of the hangars. "Probably pulled strings for a quiet deployment," the other replies, loud enough for the wind to carry the words straight to her. She's waiting for a war she isn't ready for. They don't realize that in this environment, sound bounces off the metal structures like a ricochet. She hears every word. She hears the speculation about her gamer call sign. She hears the bets being placed on how many missions it will take before she knocks out and asks for a desk job. Her face never changes. There is no burning need to correct them. There is only a steady, controlled stillness, the kind of silence that is only built over years of surviving things the people in this room haven't even dreamt of yet. Think about the pressure of being underestimated. Most people would break. Most people would try to win the room over with a joke or a display of bravado. But Alara Vance understands a truth that the loud voices haven't learned yet. In the air, your reputation doesn't fly the plane. Late that afternoon, the heat reaches a suffocating peak, turning the air into a shimmering wall of distorted light. A veteran pilot, a man whose chest is covered in "been there, done that" patches, trips over a discarded equipment bag near Vance's feet. As he reaches down to steady himself, his hand brushes against an open logbook resting on an ammo crate where Vance had been sitting moments before. He stops. His breath hitches, just for a second. He isn't looking at her name or her rank. His eyes are locked on a single column of numbers in the back of the book. It's the total count of combat flight hours. The number is impossible. It is higher than his. It is higher than the squadron commander's. It is a number that shouldn't belong to a rookie transfer with a plain gray helmet. He looks up, searching for the small, quiet woman in the faded flight suit. But she is already gone, swallowed by the shadows of the hangar. He looks back at the book, his pulse thumping in his neck, the realization chilling the sweat on his skin. Who exactly did they just let into their airspace? If the numbers in that book are real, then the woman they've been mocking isn't a replacement. She's a survivor of a conflict they weren't even told was happening. The first crack in the lie has appeared, but the storm is already moving in from the ridges. Would you tell the others what you saw, or would you wait to see if she bleeds when the first red light flashes in the cockpit? The briefing room in the heart of the Obsidian Corridors feels less like a command center and more like a pressure cooker. The air is stagnant, vibrating with the low-frequency hum of a projector that flickers every time the base generator struggles against the rising wind. On the wall, a digital map of the jagged ridges is splayed out in harsh neon greens and blues, casting a ghostly pallor over the faces of the pilots gathered in the dark. Think about the atmosphere in a room like this. It's not the heroic tension you see in movies. It's the smell of stale adrenaline, the rhythmic clicking of a pen, and the heavy silence of men trying to convince themselves they are ready for what's coming. Captain Ilara Spectre Vance sits in the second row, while the other pilots lean back with practiced ease, throwing out theories on fuel consumption and ingress angles with loud, sweeping gestures. She is a statue. Her notebook is open on her knee, not a tablet, not a glowing screen, but a weathered pad of paper. Her pen moves with surgical precision, recording coordinates, wind shear estimates, and thermal drifts. The mission planner, a man whose voice has been sandpapered by years of shouting over jet turbines, taps a laser pointer against a narrow gap in the mountain range. "We'll push the strike package through this notch," he barks. "It's the shortest route. It minimizes our exposure to the radar sites on the eastern plateau." Vance's hand rises. It isn't a bold gesture. It's a slight, controlled lift of her arm, barely clearing her shoulder. "Yes, Captain?" the planner asks, his eyes already drifting toward the back of the room. "The valley wind channels through that notch at this hour," Vance says. Her voice is level, devoid of the pilot bravado that usually fills the space. "It creates a Venturi effect. If you push through there on the inbound, the turbulence will force a wide correction. You'll lose 10 seconds of timing and burn an extra 4% of your combat fuel. I recommend a higher line over the ridge, then a vertical drop into the corridor." The room shifts. It's a subtle movement, the sound of nylon flight suits rubbing against folding chairs as people turn to look at the new girl. A pilot in the front row, a man known as Jax, who wears a chest full of morale patches, lets out a soft, audible huff of air through his nose. He doesn't look at her. He just smirks at the map. The planner nods slowly, but his expression is vacant. "Noted, Captain," he says, his tone dripping with the kind of hollow politeness you give a child. He moves the laser pointer immediately to the next objective. 5 minutes later, Jax raises his hand. "Hey, look at that notch," he says, gesturing toward the exact spot Vance had identified. "If we go through there, we're going to get tossed like a salad by the crosswinds. We should ride the ridge and drop in late to keep our speed up." The planner snaps toward him, eyes brightening. "That's a good catch, Jax." "Exactly. That's the kind of tactical intuition we need for this op." A few pilots murmur their agreement. Someone taps a pen in approval. Vance says nothing. She doesn't roll her eyes. She doesn't huff in frustration. She simply records the change in her notebook, her handwriting remaining as steady as a heartbeat on a monitor. What would you do in that silence? Would you scream for the credit? Or would you realize that in this room your voice only has as much volume as the rank and the reputation others have decided to give you? The mood in the room changes abruptly when the radio at the back of the tent bursts into life. It's not a routine check-in. It's a jagged, distorted transmission that rips through the professional quiet of the briefing. "Contact! We have contact! Taking fire from the tree line. Heavy suppression. We are pinned in the wash." The sound of the caller's breathing is ragged. The sharp pop, pop, pop of small arms fire audible in the background. The map on the wall flickers as the JTAC, the Joint Terminal Attack Controller, scrambles to update the coordinates. The calm, calculated strategy of the briefing room evaporates, replaced by the raw, metallic taste of a crisis. Chairs scrape violently against the floor. Headsets are clamped over ears. The mission planner's face goes from dismissive to pale in the span of 3 seconds. "Get the standby birds moving," he shouts. "I need grids! Give me the damn grids!" The JTAC's hands are shaking slightly as he scribbles numbers onto a plexiglass board. "Grid is 884-211. Wait, break 942. No, copy. 848-211. Voices begin to layer over each other. The tension is a physical weight now, making the air feel thin. 2 jets are already taxiing, their engines screaming into the desert night. Inside the tent, the senior pilots are shouting over the radio, trying to reconcile the conflicting numbers being bled through the static. Vance stands at the edge of the map, her eyes moving between the handwritten coordinates and the terrain projection. Her pupils are narrow, her focus absolute. She flips back a page in her notebook, comparing the new data to the patrol's original flight plan from 3 hours ago. She sees it. It's not a glaring error. It's a single digit, a transposition that changes the location by only a few hundred meters. But in the Obsidian Corridors, a few hundred meters is the difference between a dry riverbed and the side of a granite mountain. "The grid is wrong," Vance says. She doesn't shout. She doesn't have to. The clarity of her voice acts as a needle, piercing the balloon of noise in the room. The senior mission planner turns, his jaw tight, his eyes bloodshot. "The grid is verified, Captain. We have 2 pilots already in the air heading for that mark. Sit down." "The northing and easting are transposed," Vance continues, her voice as cold and rhythmic as the ticking of a cooling engine. "If you send them to those coordinates, You're putting them over a sheer cliff face. The patrol reported moving north along cover. There is no cover at that mark, only rock. The planner steps toward her, his shadow looming over her smaller frame. We don't have time for your theories, Spectre. We have men dying. Vance doesn't flinch. She points to a specific contour line on the map. If you flip the last 2 digits, it places them in the dry wash east of the ridge. That matches the terrain report. That matches their path. The JTAC looks at his screen, then at the map, then back to Vance. He's caught in the worst kind of moral dilemma. Does he trust the established system and the senior officers, or does he trust the quiet pilot that everyone has spent the last week laughing at? On the radio, the screams from the ground unit grow more desperate. The sound of a heavy machine gun, the rhythmic, guttural thud, thud, thud of a Soviet-era DShK, begins to drown out the friendly return fire. The JTAC looks at the planner, then makes a decision that will haunt him for the rest of his career. He bypasses the chain of command and keys his mic to the lead aircraft. Razor 1, divert to alternate grid. I say again, divert to the wash. Check for friendlies at the base of the saddle. The room goes deathly silent. Every person in that tent is holding their breath, staring at the speaker on the wall. Seconds stretch into an eternity. You can hear the wind whipping the canvas, the groan of the generator, the pounding of your own heart. Then, the radio pops. Razor 1, visual on movement. I have... Wait. Negative on the original grid, it's just rock. I have visual on the wash. Friendlies are pinned. We are rolling in hot. The air in the room rushes out in a collective gasp. Vance was right. If they had followed the verified coordinates, the air support would have been circling empty rock while the patrol was slaughtered 5 miles away. The planner doesn't look at Vance. He doesn't apologize. He stares at the map as if it has betrayed him. But as the first sounds of the jet's 30mm cannon, a terrifying metallic brrrt, come through the radio, a tall figure shadows the entrance of the tent. It's the visiting squadron commander. He walks straight to the center of the room, his eyes scanning the chaos until they land on Vance. He doesn't look at her rank. He looks at her eyes. I know that voice, the commander says, his voice low and gravelly. The room goes even quieter. I flew with her over the Black Sea, 3 years ago. He turns to the room, his expression unreadable. You've been making jokes about her call sign? The silence that follows is thick enough to choke on. You should know, the commander says, that the last time I saw Spectre in a cockpit, she was the only thing that came back from a 4-ship intercept, and she wasn't alone. She was towing a wingman who didn't have a tail section left. The room realizes, all at once, that the ghost isn't just haunting the base. She's the only one who knows how to survive it. But as the commander speaks, the radio flares again. This time it's not the ground unit, it's the jet. Razor 1 to ops. I've got a master caution, engine fire. I'm losing thrust. I can't stay on station. The support is failing. The patrol is still pinned. And the only pilot who knows the terrain is still standing on the ground. The smell of burning electrical insulation begins to fill the command tent, a sharp, acrid scent that signals a system on the verge of collapse. On the radio, the audio from Razor 1 is a chaotic symphony of mechanical failure, the shrill, persistent piercing of the master caution alarm and the hollow, dying whistle of a jet engine losing its lifeblood. Razor 1, status, the mission planner shouts, his voice cracking. He is no longer the confident architect of the mission. His fingers are white-knuckled as they grip the edge of the metal desk, the sweat on his forehead reflecting the erratic green glow of the radar screen. Engine fire, left side. The pilot's voice rasps through the static. I'm dumping stores. I've got no choice. I'm RTB. Return to base. Now. I can't hold the station. I'm sorry. I'm losing it. The sound of the jet's engines fading into the distance over the radio is the sound of a death sentence for the men on the ground. Think about that silence for a second. That hollow, ringing void when the cavalry turns around and disappears into the clouds. What would you do if you were in that dry wash, hearing the roar of your only protection being replaced by the rhythmic, advancing thump-thump of enemy mortars? The ground commander's voice returns, but it's different now. The panic has been replaced by a terrifying, flat resignation. Ops, be advised. We are out of smoke. We are out of anti-armor. They are closing the gap. If you're coming, come now. If not, tell the families we held the line. The mission planner looks around the room. His eyes are frantic, darting from face to face. The other pilots, the ones with the loud voices and the bright patches, are staring at their boots. Their planes are unfueled, their ordnance isn't loaded, or they are mentally paralyzed by the sheer mathematical impossibility of the distance. Vance hasn't moved. She stands in the center of the storm, her breathing slow and rhythmic, her eyes fixed on the map. She isn't looking at the coordinates anymore. She is looking at the terrain. She is visualizing the thermal pockets, the way the moonlight will catch the obsidian ridges and the exact angle of the canyon walls. Send me, Vance says. It isn't a plea. It isn't a heroic declaration. It is a statement of fact, delivered with the same clinical coldness as a weather report. The planner stops. He looks at her, then at the visiting commander. The room is a theater of conflicting desperation. Your bird isn't even prepped for a night strike, Spectre, the planner stammers. The sensors, the integration. I don't need the sensors, Vance interrupts. She steps forward, her shadow cutting across the map of the Obsidian Corridors. I know the wash. I know the thermal drift from the ridge. I can fly at low level below their radar, using the canyon floor as a guide. I don't need a computer to tell me where the mountain is. The visiting commander, the man who saw her survive the Black Sea, steps into her personal space. He searches her eyes for a flicker of doubt, a sign of ego, or a hint of the glory seeker. He finds nothing but a void, a professional, lethal emptiness. If you go in there at night, without a wingman, without active sensor suites, the commander says, his voice a low vibration in the small space, there is a 90% chance you become a permanent part of that mountain. You understand the risk? The risk is already realized on the ground, sir, Vance replies. Her hand reaches down and clicks her flight helmet into place. The visor reflects the chaos of the room, turning the faces of the other pilots into distorted, tiny figures. Think about the moral weight resting on the commander's shoulders. To authorize this is to potentially send a pilot to a certain death to save a unit that might already be gone. Would you sign that order? Would you be able to live with the silence if she never keys the mic again? The commander looks at the JTAC, then at the clock. Get her bird fueled, minimum load, just cannon and rockets. We don't have time for the precision racks. Move! The tent explodes into a different kind of motion. It's no longer the panic of a crisis, but the desperate, grinding friction of a machine trying to catch up to a ghost. Vance is already out the flap before the order is fully finished. The wind outside has turned into a gale, whipping the desert sand into a blinding shroud. The flight line is a vision of hell. Red floodlights, the smell of burnt kerosene, and the screaming of a lone turbine starting up in the dark. Vance climbs the ladder of her jet, her movements fluid and mechanical. She doesn't look back. She doesn't wave. As she seals the canopy, the sound of the world is cut off, replaced by the internal hum of her own life support system. Hiss-click, hiss-click. Back in the tent, the JTAC is hunched over his headset, his face buried in his hands. He is listening to the ground unit's final transmissions. They're inside the perimeter, he whispers to the room. Hand to hand in the east sector. They're calling for Broken Arrow. They want us to level the whole wash. The mission planner's hand trembles as he reaches for the total strike authorization. If he signs it, he kills the enemy, but he kills the friendly patrol too. Wait, the visiting commander says, his hand slamming down on the planner's wrist. He is staring at a small, flickering light on the radar screen. It's a single blip, moving at an impossible speed, hugging the jagged edges of the corridors so low that the system keeps losing it. She's not using the designated flight path, the JTAC gasps, watching the blip. She's inside the canyon walls. She's flying in the blind. On the radio, a new signal cuts through. It isn't the screaming of a panicked pilot or the static of a dying radio. It's a single, sharp click of a mic. 2 bursts, a signal of intent. Then, Vance's voice, calm and devoid of emotion, fills the tent. Spectre is on station. I have the wash in sight. Ground unit, stay in the shadows of the western wall. I'm coming in floor level. The room holds its breath as the radar blip disappears entirely. She has dropped so low that the mountains have swallowed her signal. 10 seconds pass. 20. The radio from the ground unit goes completely silent. No more gunfire, no more screaming, just the sound of the wind. Then, a massive, low-frequency boom shakes the very ground beneath the command tent, 5 miles away. A flash of orange light reflects off the distant peaks, illuminating the jagged obsidian like a row of broken teeth. Did she hit the target? Or did she hit the mountain? The flash in the distance is not a clean, cinematic explosion. It is a jagged, hellish tear in the fabric of the night, a pulse of thermal energy that momentarily turns the obsidian ridges into skeletal fingers reaching for the sky. In the command tent, the silence is so heavy it feels physical. The mission planner has stopped breathing, his lungs locked in a state of mid-exhale. The JTAC has his eyes squeezed shut, the headset still clamped to his ears, waiting for the sound of a scream or the terminal static of a crashed jet. Think about the weight of that silence. In that void, every second feels like a year. You are waiting to find out if the person you mocked, the woman you dismissed as a ghost, has just atomized herself against a cliff face or saved a dozen men who had already accepted their deaths. The radio crackles. It isn't a voice. It's the high-pitched rhythmic whistle of a rocket pod venting heat. Then, a transmission. Not from Vance, but from the dry wash. Contact confirmed. Target neutralized. The ridgeline is clear. I say again, the ridgeline is clear. Who the hell was that? The ground commander's voice is shaking, the raw adrenaline making it jump an octave. She came in so low I could smell the jet fuel. She clipped the trees on the far bank. We are moving to the extraction point now. A ragged cheer starts to break out in the tent, but it dies instantly when the visiting commander steps into the light of the projector. He isn't smiling. He is staring at the primary radar screen, where Vance's blip has finally reappeared. It is moving erratically, a jagged heartbeat of a flight path that suggests a struggle for control. Spectre, status report, the commander says, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. The response is delayed. When it comes, it is accompanied by the sound of a master caution chime, the rhythmic, mechanical ding-ding-ding that signifies a structural failure. Spectre is Winchester, Vance says. Her voice is thinner now, the calm replaced by the strained, grunting breath of a pilot fighting high-force gravity. Ordnance expended. I have a hydraulic leak in the left actuator. The airframe took a vibration after the second pass. I think I left a piece of the vertical stabilizer in the valley. The room collectively holds its breath. She didn't just fly through the canyon, she scraped it. Think about the precision required to fly a 20-ton machine through a pitch-black volcanic corridor at 500 knots, using only your inner ear and a mental map because the sensors are blind. What would you do if your controls started to go soft and the stick felt like it was moving through wet cement? The visiting commander turns to the room, his eyes scanning the faces of the pilots who, only hours ago, were laughing at her call sign. He stops at the pilot named Jax, whose face is now a mask of ashen guilt. "You want to know why she's called Spectre?" the commander asks. His voice is low, but it carries to every corner of the tent. 3 years ago, over the Black Sea, her flight was jumped by 6 unidentified interceptors. Her lead was hit. Her wingman panicked. Vance didn't. She stayed in the mid-layer, ghosting their radar by hugging the wave tops. She picked them off one by one, not because she was the fastest, but because she was the most invisible. By the time the search and rescue birds arrived, she was the only thing left in the air, orbiting the wreckage of her comrades to keep the wolves away. He pauses, the sound of the wind rattling the tent poles. She doesn't wear the patches because she doesn't want to be reminded of the people who aren't here to wear them. She is a ghost because she lives in the space between the mission and the memory. The psychological shift in the room is total. The ego, the bravado, the Top Gun posturing, it all evaporates, replaced by the crushing realization that they have been standing in the presence of a legend they were too small to recognize. They didn't see a rookie. They saw a woman who had already paid the price they were all still afraid of. But the moment of reflection is shattered by a new alarm. This one isn't coming from the radio, it's coming from the long-range early warning station. "Multiple bips! East-northeast!" the radar tech screams, his fingers flying across the keys. "They're high and they're fast. They must have been loitering behind the ridge waiting for our primary support to RTB. They're closing on the wash." The room turns back to the map. The ground unit is still 3 miles from the extraction zone, moving slowly through the rubble. Razor 1 is already 20 miles away, bingo on fuel and limping home with an engine fire. The only thing between the friendly patrol and a second, much larger enemy force is a single, damaged jet with a leaking hydraulic system and an empty gun. Vance's voice comes over the radio again, and this time there is a finality to it that chills the blood of everyone listening. "I see them. 2 bogies, high at 10 o'clock. They're diving on the coordinates." "Spectre, you are Winchester!" the JTAC shouts, his voice breaking. "You have no ammo. You have no missiles. Get out of there. That's an order." There is a long pause. The sound of the wind in the cockpit is a hollow roar. "If I leave," Vance says, her voice regaining that terrifying, flat, mechanical tone, "the patrol dies. I can't let that happen twice." The radar screen shows Vance's blip doing the unthinkable. Instead of turning toward the base, she pulls a violent high-G turn, banking her crippled aircraft directly into the path of the incoming enemy. "Spectre, what are you doing?" the commander whispers. "I'm not leaving," she replies. "What?" "I'm becoming the target." The radar shows the 2 enemy blips locking onto her. She is leading them away from the soldiers, into the deepest, narrowest part of the Obsidian Corridors, where her hydraulic failure makes every turn a roll of the dice with death. Then, the radar tech's voice drops to a whisper. "Sir, she just turned off her transponder. She's gone dark." Is she hiding? Or is she choosing the place where she falls? The darkness inside the Obsidian Corridors is absolute, a crushing, velvet void that swallows light and sound alike. Without a transponder, Alara Vance's jet is no longer a blip on a screen. It is a ghost in a machine. Inside the cockpit, the ghostly green glow of the instrument panel reflects off her visor, casting her features in a sickly, radioactive light. The master caution alarm has stopped its frantic chiming, not because the danger has passed, but because the sensor that powered the alarm has finally bled out its last drop of hydraulic fluid. The stick in her hand feels like it's connected to nothing. It's limp, a dead weight that she has to manhandle with both arms just to keep the nose from dipping into the black floor of the canyon. To her left and right, the volcanic walls are invisible, known only by the way the wind screams as it's compressed through the narrow gaps. Think about the sheer isolation of that moment. You are miles from help, flying a shattered coffin through a labyrinth of rock, with 2 hunters closing in on your tail. You have no weapons. You have no way to fight back. All you have is the weight of your own body and the knowledge that every second you stay alive is a second the men on the ground aren't being hunted. Would you keep flying? Or would you pull the ejection handle and let the darkness take the responsibility? The two enemy interceptors are high. Their radar sweeps frantically trying to reacquire the target that just vanished into the earth. They dive, their engines thundering like a coming storm. They see a heat signature, a faint, flickering pulse deep in the throat of the valley. They bank hard, G-forces pinning them into their seats, confident that they have trapped a wounded bird in a dead end. But Vance isn't running. She is waiting. She feels the vibration in the airframe before she hears the engines. It's a rhythmic, low-frequency thrum that rattles her teeth. She waits until the lead interceptor is less than a mile behind her, until the red lock-on warning should be screaming in her ears, if the electronics were still working. Then, she does the impossible. She doesn't turn. She doesn't climb. She pulls the air brakes and dumps the flaps, forcing the nose up in a violent, shuddering maneuver that threatens to tear the wings from the fuselage. The jet groans, a metallic shriek of overstressed rivets echoing through the cockpit. The lead enemy pilot, traveling at 500 knots, doesn't have time to react. He expects a dogfight. He gets a wall. He overshoots her by a matter of yards, the wash from his engines tossing Vance's crippled jet like a leaf in a gale. But in that second of confusion, the enemy is the one who is blind. He is too fast for the narrow corridor. He tries to pull up, but the obsidian ridges are already there, waiting. There is no explosion on the radio, only a sudden, sharp cessation of the engine roar as the mountain claims its due. The second interceptor breaks off, the pilot's nerves shattered by the sight of his lead vanishing into the rock. He climbs, abandoning the hunt, leaving the silent valley to the ghost. In the command tent, the silence is so profound that the ticking of a cooling coffee pot sounds like a hammer on an anvil. The visiting commander has not moved from his spot in front of the radar. He is watching the empty space where Vance's signal should be. His jaw is set so tight the muscles in his neck are bulging. Minutes pass. The ground unit keys the mic. "Ops, this is the patrol. We are at the extraction point. The air is clear. We heard something. In the valley. A crash. Does anyone have eyes on Spectre?" The JTAC tries to speak, but his throat is a desert. He just shakes his head. Then, a sound. It starts as a distant, hollow whistle, barely audible over the wind. It's the sound of a dying turbine, a mechanical wheeze that grows louder and more labored with every passing second. Outside, the mechanics and pilots, the ones who had mocked her, the ones who had placed bets on her failure, spill out onto the flight line. They stand in the dirt, their eyes fixed on the black horizon. A single set of landing lights appears. They aren't steady. They are flickering, dipping and rising as the pilot fights to keep the wings level. The jet touches down not with a smooth roll, but with a violent, jarring bounce that sends sparks showering into the night. One of the wheels is locked. The metal grinds against the tarmac, a screaming, bone-chilling sound of friction that echoes across the entire base. The jet limps to a halt at the very edge of the runway, its nose buried in the sand. The engine coughs once, twice, and then dies with a final, pathetic hiss of steam. The crash crews move in, but the canopy is already sliding back. Ilara Vance climbs out. She doesn't wait for the ladder. She drops to the ground, her knees buckling for a fraction of a second before she rights herself. Her flight suit is drenched in sweat, her face pale and streaked with the soot of the cockpit. She walks past the crowd. She doesn't look at Jax, who is standing there with his head bowed. She doesn't look at the mission planner. She walks straight to the visiting commander, who has come out to meet her. She doesn't offer a salute. She doesn't ask for a medic. She reaches into her pocket, pulls out her notebook, and hands it to the JTAC. "The coordinates for the debris field," she says. Her voice is a rasp, a dry rattle in the back of her throat. "And the patrol's final position. They need water and ammo. Send the heavy lift." She turns and walks toward the shadows of the hangars, her helmet tucked under her arm. The silent salute the commander gives her is the only recognition she will ever accept. No medals, no speeches, just the quiet return of a woman who has spent her life being underestimated, and her nights saving the people who do the underestimating. Is true heroism found in the volume of the story told afterward? Or is it found in the silence of the person who simply cleans their canopy and prepares for the next mission while the world is still trying to figure out their name? The lights of the base flicker as the generator groans under a new load. The war in the Obsidian Corridors isn't over. But for tonight, the ghosts are at rest. The legend of Spectre was born in a single night of fire and rock. But as the sun begins to rise over the ridges, a new question hangs in the air. Vance saved the patrol, but at what cost to the secrets she was hiding? Because as the mechanics strip the wreckage of her jet, they find something in the black box that wasn't supposed to exist. A recording of a voice that shouldn't have been on that frequency. Who was Alara Vance really talking to in those final seconds of the blackout? Click below for the next chapter in the Shadow Wing Files.